Smoke rose like black walls across the ruined city. The ground was broken with fire and ash, and the air shook with the sound of weapons. Alien screams echoed through the streets, mixing with the sharp cries of soldiers and the endless roar of plasma fire. Buildings that once stood proud now leaned like broken bones, their shadows covering the dead who lay in the dust. The human Marines had taken cover behind a line of cracked stone. Their armor was scorched, their helmets marked with dirt, but their eyes stayed sharp. They were trained to fight in hell, and this place was nothing less than that. Still, even trained hearts can grow heavy when the battle twists into something no soldier expects. From the smoke, the enemy appeared. Their armor shone like dark steel, their faces hidden by cruel masks. Each soldier moved with slow, certain steps, as if they knew they owned the ground. But they were not alone. In front of them, pulled by harsh claws, stumbled small shapes. The Marines froze. It was the cubs, tiny alien children, their fur soft and gray, their eyes wide and wet, stumbled forward with weak cries. Each cub was no taller than a human's waist. They clung to one another, shaking as the enemy pushed them ahead. Little hands reached for safety that was not there. The human squad leader raised his hand. His voice cracked through the comms. Hold fire. No one argued. No one moved. Rifles stayed aimed, but fingers lifted from triggers. The battlefield was already cruel, but this was worse. The enemy had chosen the lowest shield possible, the innocent. The masked soldiers laughed, their voices cold through the smoke. They dragged the cubs closer, pressing them into their armor as living cover. Weapons pointed outward, ready to strike. But the cubs' small bodies stood in the way. The Marines' hearts filled with fire, but their bodies stayed still. They could not shoot. Every shot might kill the young, and no warrior of Earth would allow that. Yet every second they waited, the enemy moved closer, and death came with them. Behind the cracked stone, the squad's breaths grew sharp. One whispered, "We're trapped. We can't fire. We can't move." Another muttered, "If they get closer, it's over." The air grew heavy, like the silence before a storm. And then one Marine moved. He was taller than most, his armor marked with burns from past battles. His helmet visor reflected the fire around him, but his eyes, though hidden, seemed to burn hotter than the flames. He did not lower his rifle, but his grip changed. The squad noticed the way his shoulders tensed, the way his breath grew loud in the comms. He looked at the cubs. Their eyes met his. Wide, innocent, begging. They were not soldiers, not fighters, just children trapped in war they could not understand. Fear shook their small frames, but in their eyes he saw something else. Hope, weak but alive. The Marine felt a pain in his chest, deeper than any wound he had taken before. For a moment, he was not in the ruins of a dead city. For a moment, he was on Earth again. He saw a little girl hiding behind a broken wall during the old raids, his sister's small hand clutching his as fire rained from above. He remembered the way she cried, the way he promised he would protect her. That memory burned brighter than any weapon. The squad leader's voice snapped again, "Hold your fire." But the Marine no longer listened. The enemy kept moving, the cubs stumbling in front of them, the soldiers laughing as they aimed their rifles higher. The Marines could do nothing. They were frozen between duty and mercy. But this one Marine knew his choice. He let out a slow breath, his jaw clenched, his hand steadied. He lowered his rifle. The others stared at him, confused. One hissed, "What are you doing?" He did not answer. He stepped forward, 1 foot out from cover. Smoke wrapped around him like a cloak. Firelight burned on his armor. The enemy saw him move. Their laughter grew. They thought he was surrendering, a fool walking into death. The cubs cried louder, pressed tighter against cruel armor. The Marine's voice cut through the noise, low and hard. If no one moves, they all die. The words hung in the air like steel. The squad stared. The enemy sneered. The cubs trembled. And the Marine took another step forward. The battlefield held its breath. Smoke curled in dark waves between the ruins, and every pair of eyes, human, alien, friend, and foe, watched a single figure who stepped into the open. The Marine did not run. He did not raise his weapon. He walked with steady, heavy steps, his boots pressing against cracked stone and burning ash. Behind him, the squad shouted into the comms, but his channel stayed silent. He heard them, but their voices were distant, like echoes at the edge of memory. What filled his mind were the cubs. Their faces were small, frightened, desperate. Their eyes had locked on him, as if he was the only thing standing between them and the void. He could not turn away from that look. No soldier could. At least, no human soldier. The squad leader's voice thundered again. Stop. Get back in cover. That's an order. But the Marine kept moving. Orders were made for battle. Orders were made for strategy. Yet this was not strategy. This was something else. Something deeper than rank or rule. He remembered again the nights on Earth when alarms screamed across the sky. His home had shaken with thunder not from storms but from weapons. His sister had hidden under broken boards, clutching his arm, her eyes wide with the same fear these cubs now carried. He remembered how small she felt, how powerless he'd been, how helpless the world seemed. But he also remembered his promise. I will protect you, no matter what. That promise had never left him. He lowered his rifle until it hung against his side. The enemy soldiers tilted their mastheads, amused at his choice. One of them shoved the cub forward and barked a laugh, as if mocking his weakness. To them, he was just another soft-hearted human. To them, mercy was a flaw. But the Marine's mercy burned hotter than their cruelty. His squad whispered in shock. What is he doing? He's insane. He'll get himself killed. Another muttered. If he makes them drop their guard, maybe. The leader growled. No. He's breaking formation. He's risking everything. Yet even the leader's voice carried something else. Something unspoken. A question. A sliver of hope. The Marine stopped walking and stood still, no more than 20 steps from the enemy line. Plasma rifles pointed at his chest. One shot would burn straight through his armor, yet he showed no fear. He lifted his hands slowly, palms outward, not in surrender, but as if to say, Look at me, not them. The enemy shifted, confused for a moment. The cubs froze, staring at him, hope flickering like a candle in the storm. One alien soldier, taller than the rest, sneered from behind his mask. His voice came sharp and cold. You would die for these little beasts? The Marine's visor reflected firelight, hiding his eyes. His voice came out steady, low, and clear. Not for them. For what's right. The words cut through the air. Even his squad went silent. The battlefield itself seemed to pause, as if the ruins listened. The enemy's soldier laughed, a cruel and empty sound. Right? There is no right. There is power. And today, power is ours. He shoved the cubs forward again, using them as shields, daring the human to act. The Marine clenched his fists, his armor creaking with emotion. Every muscle burned with tension. He could charge now. He could fight. But one wrong move, and the cubs would be the first to fall. So he waited. Every second stretched long, like an eternity. Smoke rolled, fire hissed, and hearts beat like drums. The squad behind him trembled between fear and awe. Inside the Marine's mind, one truth grew stronger. Death meant nothing if the cubs lived. He would take every shot, every wound, every blade if it bought them one chance to run. He took another step forward, closing the distance by a single pace. The enemy soldiers aimed tighter, fingers curling against triggers. A whisper ran to the Marine's comms. He's going to get himself killed. But the Marine's voice came calm and firm, cutting through despair. If no one moves, they all die. The squad leader whispered back, barely audible. Then move, soldier. Make it count. The Marine's jaw tightened. His choice was made. He would not go back. He would not hide behind stone while children were dragged to their deaths. He would not stand still while evil used the innocent as armor. He bent his knees slightly, preparing his body like a coiled spring. Every nerve screamed readiness. Every heartbeat hammered like war drums. The cubs stared at him, and for the first time, their cries quieted. They seemed to know. They seemed to sense he was not there to watch them die. He was there to save them. The enemy raised their weapons higher, laughing again. To them, this was entertainment. To the Marine, this was the edge of destiny. Smoke swirled around him. Fire burned on his armor, and the world grew small, as if only three things remained: the cubs, the enemy, and himself. And in that moment, he whispered to himself, not for the squad, not for the enemy, not even for the cubs, just for his own heart. I promised once. I will keep it again. Then, with the eyes of two armies fixed on him, the human Marine moved. The battlefield came alive the moment the Marine moved. He did not dive for cover, did not roll across the ground, did not fire his weapon. He simply walked forward, step after step, into the open ground where no soldier should ever stand. At first, the enemy soldiers hesitated. They had expected a charge, a desperate rush. But this was different. This was slow, steady, fearless. Their laughter broke out again, sharp and cruel, echoing across the broken streets. Plasma bolts lit the air. The first shot screamed past his shoulder, burning the metal of his armor. A second grazed across his thigh, searing flesh beneath. He did not stop. His stride stayed even, his arms swinging as if he walked through nothing more than heavy rain. His squad watched in silence, their hearts locked between fear and awe. The leader whispered into the comms, "He's walking through hell." Another Marine muttered, "He won't make it 5 more steps." But the steps kept coming. Smoke curled around his legs. Sparks flared against his armor. A burning shard struck his shoulder, sticking like a glowing knife, but he did not pull it free. He let the fire burn. Inside his helmet, his breath was steady, though each inhale tasted of smoke. Pain roared through his body, but his mind was sharper than the pain. He fixed his thoughts on the cubs, their small eyes wide with fear, their tiny bodies shaking in enemy hands. One step, another. Every movement felt like a lifetime. The ground shook with every explosion. Dust sprayed around him as shots slammed into the earth. Still he kept walking, refusing to break stride. The enemy grew restless. Their laughter faded into confusion. He should have fallen. He should have been ash by now. But still he came. One soldier snarled, aiming carefully. Plasma hissed through the air and struck the Marine square in the chest. The force drove him back half a step. Smoke curled from the impact. His armor glowed red with heat. Yet his boots found the ground again, and he straightened his back. He kept walking. The cubs stared at him now, their cries fading into silence. Even they seemed caught in wonder, their eyes locked on the figure who came closer with every burning step. His squad could barely breathe. Some pressed tighter into cover, unable to watch, fearing the next shot would be the last. Others leaned forward, as if their own willpower might push him further. "Come on," one whispered. "Just a little more." The enemy fired again. A bolt seared across his helmet, blinding one side of his visor. For a moment, the world turned white, but his body did not slow. He tilted his head slightly and continued forward, vision blurred but focus unbroken. Every wound, every burn became fuel. He welcomed the fire, welcomed the pain. Each scar was a promise to the cubs. Each step said the same words: I will not stop. 10 steps away, the enemy's soldiers shouted in their own tongue, their voices sharp with disbelief. They pressed the cubs tighter against their armor, using them like living walls. Their weapons rattled, their aim faltering. For the first time, fear touched their eyes. The Marine's armor smoked like a furnace. His left arm hung heavy, numb from burns. His legs trembled with effort, but his spine stayed straight. His eyes, though hidden behind cracked glass, were steady as stone. 5 steps away, the battlefield had grown quiet. Even the plasma fire slowed. The world seemed to narrow, pulling all life and death into that single strip of ground between the Marine and the enemy. His squad leader whispered, almost in prayer, if he makes it, the line breaks. The Marine heard none of it. He was beyond words, beyond fear, beyond reason. He was made flesh, moving forward because stopping meant the cubs would die. 3 steps away, the enemy leader, a massive figure with a jagged mask, snarled in frustration. He leveled his weapon, pressing the barrel against the back of a cub's head, daring the human to move again. The Marine's stride did not falter. 2 steps away, the cub whimpered, closing its eyes. The Marine's heart burned hotter than the plasma that scarred his armor. 1 step away. Now he stood before them, close enough to see the reflection of fire in their masks, close enough to hear the cub's soft, broken breaths, close enough to strike. The enemy's soldiers raised their rifles as one. The barrels pointed at his chest, his head, his heart. Any second would be his last. Yet the Marine stood tall, smoke curling from every plate of his armor, his body shaking but unbroken. He lowered his voice to a growl, steady and sharp. Let them go. The enemy laughed again, but the laughter was weaker now. Their weapons trembled, though their numbers were many and he was only one. Behind him, his squad leaned forward, waiting for the spark, waiting for the moment the storm would break. And the cubs, pressed tight against cruel hands, stared at him with new eyes. Their fear was not gone, but in its place something else flickered: belief. The Marine had walked through fire, through steel, through death itself, and he had reached them. The Marine stood within arm's reach of the enemy line. Smoke wrapped his body like a cloak, and his armor glowed faintly with the heat of plasma burns. His breath came hard, but his stand stayed tall. Around him, the battlefield seemed to fall silent. The enemy's soldiers formed a wall, their jagged masks staring down at him. Each carried a rifle pressed against the cub's small body. The young aliens whimpered softly, claws gripping the air, too weak even to struggle. Their wide eyes fixed on the human, begging without words. The Marine raised his hands slowly, palms outward, not as surrender but as focus. His calm made the enemy restless. They had seen humans fight with rage, with fire, with desperate charges. They had not seen one walk through death itself to stand in silence before them. One soldier barked a laugh, his mask tilting in mockery. He pressed his weapon harder against the cub he held, making the child cry out. So, human, the alien sneered, voice sharp and cold. Would you bleed for these tiny beasts? The Marine's visor reflected the cubs, not the soldiers. His voice came steady and clear, carrying across the ruined street. Not for them, for what is right. The words cut through the air like a blade. Even the enemy paused for half a heartbeat. His squad, still crouched behind the broken wall, froze as well. None had ever heard such calm in the face of certain death. The enemy leader stepped forward, taller, broader, his armor thicker than the rest. His mask bore jagged scars, and his rifle was aimed at the Marine's chest. His voice rumbled like thunder. Right? There is no right. There is only strength. There is only victory. And right now you have neither. He shoved one cub forward, forcing the little creature to stumble at the human's feet. Look, the leader hissed. Weak. Helpless. They are nothing. Why should you die for nothing? The Marine crouched slowly, his every movement measured, controlled. He touched the cub gently, steadying it so it would not fall. His hand was scarred, his glove burned, but his touch was soft. The cub's cries softened, its eyes locking on his. The Marine stood again, towering over the enemy soldier who had mocked him, because even the weakest life matters more than your strength. The enemy's laughter returned, but was uneasy now, filled with sharp edges instead of pure amusement. Another soldier snarled, raising his weapon higher. We can cut you down in one breath. The Marine did not move. Then why haven't you? The question hung heavy. The enemy leader's weapon twitched, but did not fire. For the first time, hesitation appeared in their line. This human did not beg. He did not fear. He stood like a wall of iron, daring them to act. Behind him, the Marines whispered in awe. He's breaking them without firing a shot. The leader of the enemy snapped his head toward his troops, anger rising at their faltering will. He growled, "Kill him!" But the Marine's voice cut through the order, louder, sharper. "Shoot me, and you prove your weakness. Use children as shields, and you show you are already beaten." The cubs whimpered, pressing closer to their captors. The enemy's soldiers shifted uneasily, their rifles trembling slightly. They had faced humans who fought like animals. They had faced humans who begged for mercy. But this one treated death like nothing, treated honor like a weapon sharper than any blade. The Marine stepped forward again, closing the distance until the barrel of the enemy leader's rifle pressed against his chest plate. The heat of the weapon burned through the armor. Still, the Marine's voice stayed calm. "If you believe in strength, then face me without them." He nodded toward the cubs. "Let them go." The leader's growl deepened. He pressed harder with the rifle, but his trigger finger did not move. His soldiers looked at one another, doubt flickering in their eyes. The cubs stared at the Marine, their fear slowly shifting into something else. "Hope." The Marine leaned closer, his voice dropping into a growl only the leader could hear. "Or I will tear your strength from you with my bare hands." The enemy leader snarled, pushing the cub behind him to hide the moment of weakness. "You think you are more than flesh, human? You think you can fight us all?" The Marine's reply was a whisper, calm and certain. "I already have." The soldiers tensed. The Marines behind cover braced. The cubs huddled, holding their breath. The standoff stretched, the air thick as stone. One spark, one heartbeat, and the silence would shatter. And in that frozen second, every eye knew the next move would decide everything. The silence broke with a spark. A soldier at the edge of the enemy line grew impatient, rage boiling over the unease that the human's calm had created. With a guttural snarl, he yanked his weapon higher and swung the cub in front of it like a living shield. His trigger finger twitched. The Marine moved. In one heartbeat, his hand shot forward, slamming the barrel aside. The shot screamed into the ground, scorching stone, but the cub fell free. The Marine's other fist struck like a hammer, smashing into the soldier's mask. Bone and metal cracked with the impact, the alien collapsing to the dirt. Chaos exploded. The enemy roared, weapons lifting, but the Marine was already inside their line. Too close for rifles, too fast for hesitation. He seized another soldier by the arm, twisting it until bone snapped, then drove the broken weapon into the enemy's chest. Sparks burst as plasma burned from the inside. The cubs scattered in panic, scrambling across the ground. Some fell, their legs weak with fear, but the Marine shifted his body to block the line of fire, absorbing blasts into his smoking armor. He roared like a beast, charging into the next soldier with unstoppable force. Behind him, his squad finally broke from cover. Shouts rang through the comms as Marines surged forward, weapons blazing, the battlefield ignited with firepower. Every shot carefully aimed around the cubs who fled toward safety. But the human Marine had no rifle now. He had only his fists, his fury, and his will. He slammed into the next enemy, grappling at close range. The alien tried to bring a knife across his throat, but the Marine caught the blade in his bare hand. Blood poured down his glove, yet he did not release his grip. With a sharp twist, he turned the blade, driving it back into the alien's chest. The soldier shrieked once before collapsing. The Marine ripped the knife free, spinning to face the leader. The tall figure's mask reflected firelight, jagged edges gleaming. Their eyes locked across the chaos. The leader snarled, voice booming. "You think this changes anything?" The Marine's reply came like stone grinding against stone. "It changes everything." The leader charged, swinging a massive blade longer than the Marine's arm. Sparks flew as steel met steel, the impact ringing across the battlefield. The Marine staggered, but his footing held. He pushed back, forcing the leader to stumble one step, then another. Around them, the fight raged. Marines and enemies clashed, rifles barking, blades flashing. The cubs crawled into shattered corners, tiny bodies huddling together as stray fire scorched the walls around them. The Marine broke the clash with a sudden headbutt, smashing his cracked visor against the leader's mask. Glass shattered. Blood dripped into his eyes, but he did not stop. His knife slashed low, carving across armor. The leader roared in pain, swinging wildly, but the Marine ducked, rolled, and came up behind him. He wrapped his arm around the alien's throat, dragging him back. Muscles strained, armor grinding, but the human's grip was iron. The leader clawed at his arm, choking, snarling, yet the Marine only tightened the hold. Another soldier lunged to help, raising a rifle. The Marine saw the movement in the corner of his eye. With no time to think, he spun, dragging the leader into the line of fire. The plasma bolt tore through the alien's chest, leaving a smoking hole. The leader screamed, his strength faltering. The Marine shoved him forward into the dirt, then stood tall, blood dripping, chest heaving. But there was no time to rest. 3 more soldiers rushed him, weapons abandoned, claws and blades raised. The Marine met them head-on. He slammed the first into the ground, bones snapping under his weight. The second carved into his side with blade, hot agony tearing through flesh. But the Marine used the pain as fuel. He grabbed the soldier's wrist and snapped it backward, ripping the blade free to drive into the alien's throat. The third soldier tackled him, both crashing into the rubble. Claws raked across his chest plate, sparks flying as armor bent. The Marine roared, head-butting again, until the mask caved inward and the soldier slumped. He pushed the body aside and dragged himself up, chest heaving, vision blurred with blood and smoke. His squad had broken through now, their rifles cutting down enemies who scattered in panic. The line that had once looked unbreakable now crumbled like ash. The enemy soldiers shouted, desperate, their discipline shattered by the sight of one human tearing through their strongest. The Marine wiped blood from his eyes, scanning for the cubs. He saw them crouch behind a collapsed wall, tiny bodies pressed together, eyes wide with terror and awe. He turned back toward the fight. The enemy leader, somehow still alive, dragged himself upright. His armor smoked, his chest bled, but his rage burned hotter than fire. He raised his massive blade once more, staggering forward. The Marine dropped his knife, spreading his hands. He wanted no weapon now. The leader roared, swinging down with all his strength. The Marine caught the blade between both hands, metal slicing into his palms, blood running like rivers. His knees buckled, the ground cracking beneath him, but he held on. With a final shout, he twisted the blade aside and drove his fist into the leader's mask. Once, twice, a third time, the mask shattered. The alien's face broke beneath the blows. The leader collapsed, his weapon falling from numb hands. Silence followed for half a breath. Then the enemy line broke. Soldiers fled into the smoke, their courage gone. The Marines cheered, their voices rising through the calms. Push them back. Finish it. But the human Marine did not join the cheer. He dropped to one knee, blood streaming from his wounds, body shaking with exhaustion. His vision blurred, but he saw the cubs crawling toward him, their tiny claws scratching across the stone. They pressed against him, clinging to his arms and legs. Their small bodies trembled, but their eyes shone with something new. Trust. The Marine let out a ragged breath, forcing a smile beneath the broken visor. You're safe now. His squad gathered around, forming a shield wall to protect the cubs and their wounded hero. Plasma fire still echoed in the distance, but here, in this broken street, the battle had turned. The Marine leaned back against the rubble, blood soaking his armor, every muscle screaming in pain. But he had kept his promise. He had walked through fire, fought through death, and broken in armies with nothing but his hands and his heart. And as the cubs clung to him, he whispered through cracked lips, "No one uses children as shields, not while a human still stands." The enemy broke first with fear. When their leader collapsed, blood pooling beneath his shattered mask, the line of soldiers that had once moved with such cruel confidence began to tremble. Their rifles wavered, their boots hesitated. Some barked orders in their guttural tongue, but the sound carried no weight anymore. The Marines saw it too. The enemy's spine had cracked. The human squad leader was the first to rise from cover, his voice booming through the calms. Push forward. Break them. The Marines surged as one, like a tide released from a dam. Rifles flared, plasma bolts cutting through the smoke. Every shot was deliberate, every burst of fire fueled not only by training, but by fury. They had watched their brother walk through fire, had seen him bleed and burn to shield the innocent. Now their own blood boiled. Now they carried his will with them. The enemy tried to regroup. Soldiers raised their weapons, snarling behind masks, but their formation faltered. They fired wildly, their discipline broken, their hearts shaken. For every Marine that fell, two of the enemy dropped beside them. The street that had seemed like a death trap only minutes ago now became a path of victory. At the center of it all, the Marine who had started the charge knelt in the dust. Cubs pressed against him. His armor smoked. His blood ran hot, but he refused to fall. He turned his body into a shield, placing himself between the children and the storm. Plasma fire hissed over his shoulders. Sparks rained down, but the cubs were untouched. One cub, braver than the rest, pressed its small hand against the cracks in his visor, as if trying to steady him. He felt the tremble of that hand, light as a whisper, and he forced himself upright once more. His voice rasped through the calms. "Hold the line. For them." The words rippled like thunder. Every Marine who heard them felt their spines straighten, their aim sharpen. The squad leader barked, "Advance by fire." The Marines moved like a machine, covering one another, their boots pounding across the rubble. Smoke parted under their advance. Grenades arced into enemy cover, exploding in bursts of fire that scattered the defenders. The screams of the enemy carried across the battlefield, mixing with the battle cries of humans who refused to bend. Still, the fight was not done. From the far side of the ruins, heavy reinforcements emerged, larger aliens in thicker armor, carrying weapons that spat molten beams capable of melting stone. They roared. charging into the fray, their eyes fixed on the wounded Marine and the cubs he guarded. The squad leader saw them and cursed. Heavy troopers incoming. Braced for impact. The Marines shifted, their formation tightening. They poured fire into new wave, but the heavy troopers absorbed the damage, their armor glowing beholding. Step by step, they closed the distance, weapons raised. The Marine, shielding the cubs, forced himself to stand. Every nerve screamed in protest, but he ignored it. His rifle lay broken somewhere in the dust, yet his hands found the fallen blade of the enemy leader. He gripped it with bloody fingers, lifting it high. He turned to the cubs, his voice steady despite the pain. "Stay low. Don't move." The cubs clung to one another, nodding with wide, frightened eyes. Then the Marine stepped forward, planting himself between the charging heavy troopers and the children. His armor was cracked, his body near collapse, but his stance was unyielding. The squad saw him and shouted as one, "Protect the shield. Protect him." Their fire redoubled. Plasma bolts streaked across the street, hammering the heavy troopers. Smoke and fire filled the air. Some of the giants fell, their armor glowing with heat, but others pressed on. One massive alien broke through the line, raising a weapon longer than a human's body. He aimed at the cubs. The Marine roared, charging forward. He swung the jagged blade with all his strength, cleaving into the alien's arm. Sparks burst, the weapon falling to ground. The alien backhanded him with crushing force, sending him skidding across the rubble. Blood sprayed, armor dented, but he dragged himself upright again. He would not stay down. The heavy trooper stepped closer, raising its other weapon. But before it could fire, a storm of human gunfire ripped through its chest. The squad had seen their brother fall, and they answered with fury. The giant collapsed, shaking the ground as it hit. "Keep moving," the squad leader roared. "Don't let them through." The Marines pressed harder, step by bloody step. Their rifles blazed, grenades burst, and the enemy line shattered further. The heavy troopers that remained faltered, their advance slowed. For every one that pushed forward, two more dropped beneath the rain of human fire. The Marine with the cubs staggered back into position, his blade dragging against the stone. His visor was cracked nearly open, one eye visible through the splintered glass. That eye burned with fire. He raised the blade again, ready to strike anyone who came close. Around him, the cubs huddled, their small bodies pressed tight together. They no longer whimpered. They watched. They believed. The enemy realized too late that the battle had turned. Their strength, their cruelty, their living shields, all had failed. And now they face an enemy who would rather burn alive and surrender, who would rather fight empty-handed than let innocence fall. The Marines stormed through the ruins, driving the enemy back step by step. Bodies littered the ground, the once proud invaders now broken and bleeding. The smoke that had once hidden their advance now covered their retreat. One soldier shouted into the comms, voice fierce with triumph, "They're running!" The squad leader's reply was sharp. "Don't let them escape. Make them remember this day." The Marines pressed harder, chasing the fleeing soldiers into the smoke. Their victory cries rose, filling the broken city with human defiance. But at the center of it all, the Marine stood with the cubs, refusing to move until the last danger was gone. Blood soaked his armor, his body trembled with exhaustion, but his stance was a wall. Nothing would pass him. Nothing would touch them. The squad cleared the last pockets of resistance, their fire echoing until only silence remained. Slowly, the battlefield grew still. Smoke drifted, flames crackled, but the enemy was gone. The Marines gathered around their brother, eyes wide with awe. One whispered, "He did it. He broke them." Another muttered, "No, he showed us how to break them." The squad leader stepped forward, laying a hand on the wounded Marine's shoulder. You carried us all, soldier. Without you, the city would be theirs. Without you, those cubs would be dead." The Marine said nothing. His breath came heavy, his body swayed. But his grip on the blade did not loosen. The cubs clung tighter to his legs, their small claws digging into his armor, as if they could keep him standing. Their wide eyes glistened with tears, not of fear, but of gratitude. The Marine finally let the blade fall with a heavy clang. He dropped to one knee, wrapping his arms around the cubs. His cracked visor tilted low, his voice a whisper. "You're safe." And for the first time since the battle began, his squad allowed themselves to believe it. The battle was over, but the city still wept. Smoke curled into the skies like black fingers. Walls leaned in crooked silence, their stones cracked by fire. The streets, once alive with voices, were now littered with broken armor and scorched weapons. The cries of the dying faded into the distant crackle of flames. And in the center of it all, one man knelt. The human Marine's armor was ruined. Plates hung loose. His visor was fractured almost beyond use, and his body trembled with every shallow breath. Yet he did not fall. Around his legs, the alien cubs clung to him as though he were an anchor in a storm. Their tiny claws pressed against his wounds, their wide eyes filled with something new, not just fear, not just relief, but trust. His squad moved through the ruins, their boots crunching against rubble. They had driven the enemy back. They had claimed the streets. But their victory was not what filled their hearts. It was the sight of their brother, broken, bloodied, yet unyielding. The squad leader lowered his rifle, stepping close. His voice was rough, heavy with awe. "You did it, soldier. You saved them." The Marine looked up through his cracked visor. His lips moved, dry and cracked, forcing out words. "We saved them." His voice was a whisper, but it carried. Every Marine nearby heard it and knew it was true. The cubs pressed tighter against him. One, braver than the rest, reached up and touched his scarred jaw where the visor had split. Its voice was soft, trembling. "Safe, human-made safe." The words froze the squad. They exchanged glances, realizing what they had just heard. The cub spoke not only with gratitude, but with something deeper, a vow etched into a young heart. But the human did not speak again. His strength finally betrayed him. He slumped against the rubble, his chest rising and falling slowly. "Medic!" the squad leader shouted. At once, 2 Marines rushed forward, kneeling by their brother, working fast to stabilize him. But as they cut into his broken armor, they realized something. His body was failing. Too many wounds. Too much blood lost. "Can we move him?" one asked. "Not yet." The medic snapped, hands working furiously. "We keep him alive here first. He's not done fighting." The cubs would not leave his side. They pressed around the medics, their small forms trembling, but none of them ran. They had seen what it meant to be abandoned, to be used as shields. And they had seen what it meant to be protected. They knew where they belonged. The squad leader rose, scanning the ruined street. "Whole perimeter. If the enemy comes back, they'll have to go through us." The Marines spread out, their weapons ready. But the enemy did not return. Their will had been shattered. They had looked upon one human who refused to break, and they had fled. Hours passed before reinforcements arrived. Dropships thundered overhead, their engines scattering smoke. Out poured soldiers, medics, and supplies. Relief washed across the surviving Marines, but they did not lower their guard until the cubs were carried to safety. One of the alien elders stepped down from his ship, robe singed by fire, face lined with age. His people had hidden during the slaughter, powerless to resist. Now he walked toward the Marine, lying in the rubble. He looked down at the broken man, at the cubs who clung to him still, and his voice trembled. "In our histories," the elder said, "humans were marked as dangerous, unpredictable, too reckless to trust. But today, I see we were blind. His eyes glistened as he lowered his head. Today, we saw what humanity truly is. The words rippled through those who stood nearby. Alien civilians whispered. Soldiers exchanged looks. Even Marines shifted uneasily. For in that moment, they realized something larger than the battle had been won. A story had been born. The Marine did not wake for days. He hovered between life and death, his body bound in machines. His blood replaced more times than anyone could count. But he lived. And when his eyes finally opened, the first thing he saw was not the medics, not the sterile walls of the field hospital, but the cubs. They were seated at his bedside, curled up together, refusing to leave. When his eyes flickered open, they stirred at once, crawling up onto the edge of the bed. Their small hands touched his arm, their voices soft. Safe. Human-made safe. The Marine let out a weak laugh that cracked into a cough. His voice was raw but steady. Still here. Told you I'd keep you safe. One cub nuzzled against his arm. Another simply stared wide-eyed as though watching a miracle. When the squad leader entered, he stopped at the sight. His voice was low. You become their guardian. The Marine turned his head slightly, his broken smile faint but fierce. Someone had to be. Weeks later, when the War Council convened, reports of the battle filled every chamber. Alien commanders who once dismissed humanity now replayed footage of one Marine standing against an army. They watched his broken body shield the cubs, his fists tear through armored soldiers, his voice carry defiance through fire. Some called it madness, others called it courage. But none could deny the truth. Fear of humans spread to their enemies like wildfire. Respect spread through their allies just as fast. The alien elder who had seen it firsthand spoke before the council. His voice carried weight, his words unshakable. Mark it well. Humans will walk through fire for those they choose to protect. They will bleed, they will burn, they will stand when no other can. Let no one in this galaxy ever mistake them again. The Marine returned to the city months later, still scarred, his body slower than before. But when he stepped from the transport, he was not met with silence. The streets filled with survivors, aliens who had once avoided human eyes. They cheered, they raised their hands, they pressed their children forward to see him. And among them were the cubs. No longer trembling, no longer crying, they raced forward, their voices rising. Guardian, guardian. The Marine knelt, letting them climb into his arms despite the pain it caused. His squad watched from behind, their eyes heavy with pride. They knew this moment was larger than a single soldier, larger even than their unit. It was a moment that would be remembered, for legends are not written in ink. They are carved in scars, in battles endured, in promises kept. The Marine had walked through fire to save children not his own, and in doing so, he had lit a flame that no enemy could ever put out. Years later, alien textbooks no longer listed humans as reckless or unpredictable. Instead, a new entry appeared, repeated across worlds. Humans, protectors, dangerous when cornered, unstoppable when defending their own, and terrified when fighting for the innocent. They will walk through fire, and they will not stop until those behind them are safe. And at the bottom of that entry, one story was always told first. The story of the Marine who stood in the ruins, broken and burning, yet unyielding, because no one, not even an army, could make him abandon the cubs he swore to protect.